And welcome to today's webinar on your BYOD Policy Part 1, Provisioning and Security. My name is Vanessa Cardwell. I'm Marketing Manager here at Network Utilities, and I'm joined this morning by our Network and Security Specialist, Malcolm Orakoya. Network Utilities are Juniper Elite Partners, and we've been partnering with Juniper since 2006. So this is the first in our series of 4 webinars covering the Juniper Network Simply Connected story. So please keep an eye out for details of parts 2, 3 and 4, which cover performance, reliability and management. The purpose of the webinar series is to really hone in and go into some detail on each of the areas of the Simply Connected story so we can support your understanding of each element and break it down into sections most relevant for you. So starting today on provisioning and security. So to get started, let me quickly just take you through today's agenda. Today's presentation will last about 25 minutes with an opportunity for you to submit questions which we will answer at the end. So please use the question tab on the control panel to submit questions at any stage during the presentation. So we want to make our webinar a little bit different today. We're going to try and make this a bit more interactive than normal. So we're inviting you to contribute to the discussion today by asking you to respond to a couple of poll questions on BYOD. We'll be feeding back to you on the responses to these at the end of this morning's webinar, so do please stay tuned to hear the findings on those. So, as mentioned, we're going to be covering Simply Connected, Juniper's integrated portfolio of enterprise products, and how these address the current trends of BYOD, mobility, access, and security. So, with BYOD front of mind, I'd like to now invite you to answer a couple of those poll questions I mentioned. So, I'm just going to launch the first poll question now, which is, in the last 18 months, what level of increased demand from end users to bring their own devices to work have you seen? So I'll just give you a couple of seconds to submit your responses to those. I can see that the votes are coming in for that now, which is great. So I'll just give you a couple more seconds. Lovely. Okay, I'm now going to close that one down, and I'm going to go into our second poll question, which is, do you currently have a BYOD policy in place to deal with increased user demands for BYOD? So if you could please submit your votes to that, and again I'll give you a couple of seconds to do that now. Okay, that's brilliant. Thank you very much indeed for that, and I'll give you the results to those poll questions at the end. So I'd now like to ask Malcolm to join me in exploring and explaining how Juniper Networks, wired, wireless, firewall and identity solutions collaborate to create the industry's simplest provisioning and policy enforcement experience.
Thank you, Vanessa. Good morning all. I'm just going to run through some of the details of the provisioning and security aspects of the Juniper Simply Connected message. Over the last few years, we've seen a couple of trends in the industry, being the influx of mobile devices and the consumerization of IT, or BYOD. As a result of these trends, IT have got increased pressure to deal with securely managing and provisioning employee-owned devices and making sure that they ensure performance and reliability across their network. In addition to that, wireless access is a primary means by which users want to access all resources now, so there's added pressure on your wireless infrastructure. So the simplification of access, provisioning, security is essentially the key of our message today.
Okay, so Juniper Networks has always been innovative in its approach to simplifying various network elements. In this particular presentation, Malcolm and I are going to talk through together Juniper's architecture for the enterprise network called Simply Connected, but with a specific focus on provisioning and security.
Right, in this slide here, we just wanted to point out some of the quotes that we like. All great things are simple, however, creating simple stuff is actually very complex. It obviously requires some great innovation and complicated technology on the back end to create seamlessness and simplicity. And all that exists within the Juniper wireless LAN architecture.
Okay, so now let's take a look at the provisioning use case in detail and what Juniper actually means when they say they simplify the provisioning experience for enterprise IT for wireless LAN networks.
And under that, we're going to take a look at what you see on the screen there. device configuration, security cert provisioning, employee self-registration, guest self-provisioning, secure remote access, and Juniper iPass service.
Okay, so let's start here with device configuration. So as an example, as a network user, I want my mobile device to be automatically configured for use on my secure corporate network. I don't know anything other than my login credentials and a starting wireless SSID.
Which is typically what you'd expect from an end user. And historically, the IT department provisions corporately issued devices to employees. But as we mentioned already, that trend is changing. So more and more employees are bringing in their own personally owned devices, and they want to access your wireless network and corporate resources. So this is challenging the IT department so they can provision those employee-owned devices, secure those employee-owned devices, while at the same time trying to keep their help desk calls down. So Juniper proposes that this provisioning process for employee-owned devices needs to be very automated, and I'm just going to talk through the steps here. So first step is obviously connecting to your guest SSID. The user connects to the wireless network via the SSID and downloads the Junos Pulse client from the application store. Via the Junos Pulse client, the user either registers their details with the cloud, or optionally you can get your enterprise IT to pre-register that device for your user. The user then uses the registered client to connect to the service and download a wireless configuration profile for their secure connection. The wireless configuration profile then reconnects with that device and prompts the user for their credentials. Once the credentials are authenticated to your authentication server, access is granted to the resources that the user requires.
Okay, thank you for that. So presumably that's really simplified the device provisioning experience.
Yeah, as you can see from those steps, that's true. I mean, now all you need is one simple step of logging in with your Junos Pulse client, and we've reduced the possibility of any human error and also reduced the help desk calls that you'll get through your network.
Okay, great. So if we move on here and focus in on security cert provisioning. So in this example, I'm an IT administrator. I want to authenticate mobile devices on my wireless network using strong certificates. But on the other hand, as a network user, I don't know anything about PKI, nor do I want to. So as I understand it, security cert provisioning is one of the more complex tasks of device provisioning onto a wireless network.
That's absolutely correct. A user that's required to log onto a wireless ETLS network must get the security certificates on that device, and historically that's a very cumbersome process. However, with Juniper's Junos Pulse client and the mobile device management server, we can significantly simplify the process of getting the certificate downloaded onto your mobile devices. So I'm just going to talk through the steps again on the slide here. With the agent already downloaded from the store and on your mobile device, the Pulse agent via the connection downloads a configuration profile which includes the SCEP enrollment protocol. The enrollment protocol then allows the device to enroll and download the certificate for the device as well as the CA certificate from your public key infrastructure. The configuration from Pulse then configures the device to connect to your secure wireless ETLS network. And once the device reconnects, it uses the certificate that it's just got to authenticate to the service and access the resources that it needs at the back end. Now we believe this is probably the best provisioning experience in the industry and probably the simplest provisioning experience in the industry for onboarding mobile devices onto a secure wireless network.
Okay, so now let's take a look at employee self-registration. So again, the scenario is I'm an employee, I want to register my new device, for example my new iPad, for use on my corporate network. So can you talk us through that one?
Now, this is a very interesting requirement here. Some enterprise IT departments want users to register any device that they're going to use to access resources. So here we can start talking about employee self-registration, which essentially enables a user to register their new or existing device with the IT department based on the credential that the IT department need to provision that device. So if we go through the list here, IT first of all obviously has to provision a SSID that the user is going to connect to for provisioning or registration. The employee then connects to that SSID. They're redirected via a captive portal to a web logon page where they'll be required to enter their corporate credentials and also the device details. Whatever details the IT department requires will be on that part of the form. The Junos Pulse configuration profile is then configured and downloaded onto the device, and the connection to the network is granted based on the profile that the IT department configured. The thing to bear in mind with this as well is, in addition, the employee self-registration has allowed IT to have a tie-in between the user and the devices on the network. And it's also allowed you to push any wireless configuration that's bespoke for any particular users or devices.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, so now what about guest users? So as a guest user of a wireless network, I need the ability to simply walk on site, create a temporary access account for myself without involving, in an ideal world, any other local personnel.
Right, guest self-provisioning is obviously a major thing for industry enterprises right now. It's really important because a lot of guest solutions out there sometimes require an admin in the lobby to give you the credentials. For example, Cisco calls theirs the lobby ambassador. Now this can be very cost and resource intensive. So Juniper have the Smart Pass technology combined with their wireless LAN architecture, which allows guest credentials to be automatically generated based on the user's mobile phone number or email address. So if I talk through the slides here on how this happens, the user obviously connects to the guest SSID. They get redirected via a captive portal to a web page where they're required to enter their user details and their mobile telephone number or email address. The details for guest access, the credentials for guest access, are then sent to the mobile device via an SMS text message or the email telephone number that you've registered. And those details are then used to reconnect to the guest access network. So it's very important here because if you don't put in the correct mobile telephone number or the correct email address, then you're obviously not going to get access to your network.
Okay, so presumably in certain circumstances, there is still a need for this lobby ambassador type of role?
Yeah, absolutely. There's probably always going to be a need for the lobby ambassador, but in many circumstances, automating guest self-provisioning greatly saves time, money, and resources in order to accomplish wireless guest access.
Okay, so moving on here to a really important one, secure remote access. So now the situation is I'm not in the office, I'm working remotely, and I need seamless access to my corporate resources regardless of where I am.
This is a very important one. Obviously, we have a lot of roaming users and users that are working remotely from home and on the road. So here we can talk about Juniper's secure remote access. Now, obviously, today carrying around an access point, a clunky access point, as some vendors have suggested in the past, is completely archaic and just wouldn't work. So we have all kinds of connections available to us, from 3G to 4G access on various devices. And we have Wi-Fi hotspots available on the road, anywhere from Starbucks to airports, hotels, and conference centers. So the message from Juniper here to simplify secure remote access is, again, to use the same Juniper Pulse client. If we talk through the steps here for secure remote access on the slide, the user, again, has downloaded the agent from the App Store, has it on their device. In the agent, they put in their user credentials, their corporate credentials. The Pulse agent then automatically establishes a secure VPN connection to their SSL VPN appliance, whether it's a Juniper SA or MAG series appliance. And if the user changes access technology, the Pulse automatically maintains and reestablishes that secure connection to the SSL VPN appliance. Thereby, the user is then authenticated with the user credentials and is allowed access to the resources that they require remotely. So, thing to bear in mind here is Junos Pulse has completely changed the remote access experience. Obviously now, instead of carrying an access point around, all you need is an application readily available at most app stores, either on your mobile device or on your laptop.
Okay, so let's talk about Juniper's iPass service now. So this is looking at the IT administrator. So how, as an IT administrator, do I provide a centrally managed and cost-effective roaming service for my mobile users who undoubtedly expect seamless and free access to corporate resources?
Right, as you mentioned, the iPass service from Juniper is probably considered one of the best hotspot roaming services, primarily because it's readily available at thousands of partner locations, and corporations can very easily make that service available to their employees. One of the reasons iPass is so widely used is because it's simple, it's seamless, and it doesn't require the user to pay anything up front. And it doesn't require the user either to go onto a web page and put in various registration details. If I talk through on the slide here the steps involved in connecting via the iPass service with the Junos Pulse client already downloaded on your device, the user enters their iPass credentials as well as their corporate credentials onto the Junos Pulse agent. The Junos Pulse agent then automatically finds the iPass Wi-Fi hotspot within your location, whether you're in a conference center or a hotel or wherever. And that Pulse agent automatically establishes a secure VPN tunnel to your SSL VPN appliance back at your headquarters over that iPass service without the user having to put in any user registration details or pay anything up front. So the user experience here is completely simplified, and all the user needs to do really to access a network with the iPass service is just walk onto the network, click on an iPass, enter their corporately issued credentials, and they're given access to what they need.
Okay, so it's really simple.
Absolutely. So on this slide here, I just want to sort of cover everything we've talked about and bring it all together. The slide shows all the technologies and concepts that are integrated within the Juniper end-to-end provisioning and security solution as part of the overall Simply Connected message. There are various things here that are quite important, such as the time-based dynamic policy or location-based policy. But if I pick the top left one, for example, firewall policy, and just talk about it a bit, here's where we have an integration between the Unified Access Control device from Juniper and the Security Enforcement device, the SRX firewall, which work in lockstep to enforce policies and dynamically provision policies to the firewall or end-user devices, especially where the posture of that device changes. So, for example here, if a user has a device that has an antivirus on it, and they have access on your network, and the UAC device has provided the policy-based or role-based requirements that they need, and they decide to disable that antivirus. The UAC device detects that change, that posture change on the device, and automatically, or dynamically rather, provisions a policy to the device and your firewall to do whatever the IT department wants, either quarantine that device until the device has enabled its antivirus, or maybe block that device from your network. So that's a very important aspect there, the integration between the UAC and the SRX. Another one we could probably pick on the slide there is mobile security. Obviously, mobile security is extremely important now for enterprise IT. It's probably one of the single biggest reasons why IT departments are fighting against BYOD. But the Juniper Junos Pulse client can help here, because you have a personal firewall on the devices, you get antivirus protection and anti-spam protection, amongst other features here. So this can really help to reduce some of the mobile security concerns that enterprise IT have. So in summary, to round it off, Juniper's wired, wireless, firewall, and identity solutions collaborate to create what is the industry's simplest policy enforcement experience, really.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much indeed, Malcolm, for taking us through that and sort of illustrating those scenarios for us. All of the Juniper products within the Simply Connected portfolio, as well as mobile device management and iPass, are available through Network Utility Systems. So we invite you to contact a solutions expert on our team for further information on any of the Juniper products that we've discussed here today. So thanks again for that, Malcolm. So we're just going to round off with some questions. So if you have any questions on anything you've seen today for Malcolm, please do use the question tab to submit those now. But in the meantime, I will quickly just show you the results of those two polls that we launched at the top of the webinar. The first one, see what the results of those are like. In the last 18 months, what level of increased demand from end users to bring their own devices to work have you seen? So a pretty mixed bag there, but certainly we've seen primarily seen increases across the board there. So 38% seeing between 30 and 50%, 50 to 80%, 25% of you are seeing that increase. So some interesting stats coming through on that. Let me just quickly show you the results from our second poll question that we asked, and thank you very much for taking the time to contribute to those. Do you currently have a BYOD policy in place to deal with increased user demands for BYOD? And we can see there that would fit with the BYOD trend that 45% of you that responded to that question have actually got a BYOD policy in progress. 40% if you haven't, and 15% have already got one. So I guess that would sort of fit with the industry trends that we're experiencing now. Okay, so let me just close that down and now open up to questions. So while I was going through those polls, we did have a couple of questions submitted. You've still got time to submit a question, so if you'd like to, please feel free to do that now. So let me just quickly go through the couple that we've had. Malcolm, this is one for you. Do you just have to have a Juniper product on your network for these Simply Connected solutions to work, or can you overlay the solutions?
No, you don't just have to have Juniper products on your network. Juniper's products are open standards based, so they will work quite easily and interoperate quite easily with any other vendors, switching, firewalling, or security products. Obviously, to have an end-to-end Juniper architecture means you can take advantage of a lot of the features that we've talked about here today, but no, it's not mandatory to have just Juniper products. We will work with any other vendor's products.
Okay, that's great. And we'll just take one more before we finish up this morning. Can you explain in a little more detail, again another one for you, how the Juniper product set can reduce my IT and admin overheads? So presumably this is around the self-provisioning aspect.
Yeah, absolutely. I hope through the presentation we've been able to pick up there some of the provisioning benefits that the Juniper provisioning and security Simply Connected message brings. Now, obviously, stuff like guest access is important for enterprises now, and being able to automate that process and allow guest users to simply walk onto your network, quite visibly pick which SSID is supposed to be for guest users, and automatically provision themselves access to the network can greatly save IT time and just reduce the overhead on IT to have to deal with that, really. And obviously takes out the need for a lobby ambassador as well. Other things like users bringing their own devices onto the network and registering it with IT can greatly help there as well, because you don't need to get them to bring it into the IT department and then provision it for them and so on and so forth. You can set this up so the employees can self-provision themselves, really, register the devices. And another thing to bear in mind with that is you keep track of these things with the Juniper solution. You know, you have a tie-in between the user and the devices and when they're accessing your network.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much for that, Malcolm. Thank you very much indeed to all of you for joining the webinar today. We hope you found it useful. A recording will be made available shortly, so keep an eye out on our website for that. And if you'd like to speak to a solution expert about anything you've seen today, please do get in touch with us on the numbers here. Many thanks. We hope to see you for parts 2, 3, and 4. And thank you very much to Chris, who's just emailed a question to me saying part 2 is in 2013. Thanks for pointing out the deliberate mistake there. We were going to do part 2 in January, but we've now moved this forward to Wednesday the 5th of December this year, 2012. So apologies for the error on the slide there. But we've seen a demand for these webinars, and as a result, we want to keep the pace going. So we are going to be showing part 2 on Wednesday the 5th of December at 11 o'clock this year, 2012. So thanks for pointing out that deliberate mistake there, keeping you on your toes. So for ease on that, I'll send out Outlook calendar invitations so you can register directly for this webinar, and that one's going to be looking at performance and scalability. Parts 3 and 4 will be in 2013, in January and February, and we'll look at reliability and management in those ones. So again, great seeing so many of you joining us today, and we hope to see you on the 5th of December 2012 for part 2. Thank you.